In this video, we're going to take a peek into some of the contents of this course. We're going to go over the outline and the structure of this course, and also some of the content that you'll be learning within this course. This is going to set a great foundation that you'll build off of, and also set some expectations for what you'll get out of this course. When it comes to subnetting IP ranges, you're going to be working a lot with binary numbers. We have to have a solid foundation, a great understanding of working with these binary numbers. Without that solid foundation, you're really going to struggle with IP subnetting. So what we're going to do is we're going to take an in-depth look into binary numbers and how to do some calculations with them. We'll kick this module off with a brief explanation of how computers work and process information. This is going to give you just some insight into why we use binary numbers. Then we'll get into some different numbering systems. There are a lot of different numbering systems out there. You're used to working with the decimal system, but you're probably not used to working with binary systems. And binary systems can be a little strange when you first get into it. However, if we can understand how numbering systems work as a whole and apply that to binary numbers, then we can better pick up binary numbers and understand those binary numbers. Then we're going to learn how to do some conversions between numbering systems. We'll learn how to go from binary to decimal and how to go from decimal to binary. These are going to be critical skills when it comes to IP subnetting. I highly recommend don't go on to the next module until you really fully understand how to work with binary numbers and how to do these conversions. Thankfully, I have a lot of activities that can help you practice these to make sure you have it down. When we're ready to move into the next module, we're going to be getting into IP addresses and what IP addresses look like. Here again, we're going to start out with just a brief explanation of how networking works. This is going to give you some idea of why we use IP addresses and how we use IP addresses. We'll start out by looking at the history around IP addresses. Understanding the history of how IP addresses were developed gives us a better understanding of why we need to do the subnetting and how it all came about. So we'll take a look at the history, and in fact the rest of the course is really built off of the history about IP addressing as we step through learning how IP addresses work and how we do this subnetting. We'll get into classful addresses and how we identify classful addresses. From there, we'll be able to identify the network addresses, the broadcast addresses, and all the host addresses of any particular network range. We'll also learn how to identify specific address types. And in each one of these modules, I'm going to talk about the application and how this actually applies to the real world. Once we have a great understanding around binary numbers and how to do those conversions, and we also have a great understanding around IP addresses and how they function, then we can jump into subnetting. And so that's the next module, is we're going to be talking about subnetting. We'll learn how to quickly identify the default subnet mask for any given address. And we'll learn how to identify how many bits we're going to need to borrow, and then what the custom subnet mask will be based off of that information. And then we'll spend quite a bit of time talking about and going through exercises with breaking these networks down into sub-networks. Once we have subnetting down, then we can go into VLSM, or Variable Length Subnet Masking. Variable Length Subnet Masking is really the same thing as subnetting, but it just takes it to the next level. We subnet, but we have variable lengths with those subnets. So that will be the next module we get into, and as long as you understand subnetting, this will just be another step in your learning process. And just like before, I have a lot of activities to help you practice variable length subnet masking and make sure you have those concepts down. Then we're going to get into IPv6 subnetting. But before we do that, we have to understand hexadecimal numbers. So the next module that we'll cover is talking about hexadecimal numbers. And just as we did with the binary systems, comparing it to other numbering systems, we'll do the same thing with the hexadecimal. We'll give it a basis for what hexadecimal looks like. We'll get into then the conversion of these hexadecimal numbers. Everything from binary to hexadecimal, hexadecimal to binary, from decimal to hexadecimal, and hexadecimal to decimal. Once we understand hexadecimal, then we can jump into IPv6 subnetting. Now, IP version 6 subnetting is a little more simplistic than IP version 4 subnetting. And the reason is because it's a newer standard, and so it's set up to do subnetting in a much easier way. But we'll jump into it. We'll still take some of the things that we learned from IP version 4 subnetting and apply it to this IP version 6 subnetting. We'll start once again by talking about IP version 6 addresses, what the formatting looks like, what different ranges are, what different types of addresses are, before we actually get into the subnetting part. IP version 6 addresses are a lot longer, so we'll talk about compression and how to simplify the addresses. Of course, since we compress them, we'll also have to understand how to do the reverse and expand the IP address. We'll talk about prefixes and hextets, and then get into IP version 6 subnetting and what IP version 6 subnetting looks like. There's two different ways that we can do IP version 6 subnetting. There's a basic way and there's a more advanced way, and we'll talk about both of those methods. And then finally what we'll do is we'll wrap this all up by talking about how we would actually architect a network, the application side of this, what you would actually do if you were applying this to a network out there. So we'll take a look at a network and then start applying the subnetting skills to this network and how we would break it apart. Now, what I found as a professor teaching this information is that this is a lot of new concepts for a lot of people. And new concepts are a little harder for us to pick up because we don't have prior knowledge for this to stick to. And so it can be a little bit more difficult. But as long as you start at the beginning and work your way through the content and make sure that you really understand things before progressing on to the next level, then you're gonna do great. I've really stair-stepped this so that way we can get to the level where we're stellar at IP subnetting and really understand it. So I also hope you really enjoy going through this because it's like little puzzles, and as you're going through, as long as you're not trying to rush things, you can have fun with the material. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed putting it together for you.